Welcome back to Face the Nation, and we have some breaking news. CBS News Justice Department correspondent Bob Orr reports that the federal government will order its own independent autopsy. We'll have more on that as more details become available. We're here again with NAACP President Cornell William Brooks. He's joined by Eric Dyson of Georgetown University. Ruth Marcus and Michael Gerson are both columnists for the Washington Post. Eric Dyson, where are we on race relations in America in light of what's just happened here?
Well, it's obviously a very tense time. Look, what's happening there is not simply about St. Louis, but it's about the nation. And St. Louis is emblematic, or at least Ferguson is emblematic of those larger shifts. You got white flight of a formerly predominantly white suburb. It's now, what, 65% black. You've got 22% poverty. You've got the over-policing of an entire community who feel racially harassed by the police. Every 28 hours across America, a black person is killed by a security guard, a police officer, or some other executive of the state or police force. So this is an extraordinarily incendiary situation. And look at what's been done. The militarization to which you referred earlier has revealed itself to be something that's not effective when applied to American citizens. On top of that, the tone-deaf police chief, the tone-deaf mayor, and the tone-deaf governor have not added anything to the situation. We understand they're in very difficult situations. He did, that is the governor, bring Ron Johnson in. I'm from the community. I understand your plight and predicament. Let me keep the peace while also understanding what you have to say is legitimate. And finally, I yearn for more response from the White House. This president knows better than most what happens in poor communities that have been, antagonized historically by the hostile relationship between black people and the police department. It is not enough for him to come on national television and pretend that there's a false moral equivalency between police people who are armed and black people who are vulnerable constantly to this. He needs to use his bully pulpit to step up and to articulate this as a vision, not necessarily in terms of public policy alone, because Eric Holder is doing a tremendous job in filling in those gaps. But we need presidential leadership. He needs to step up to the plate and be responsible.
Mr. Brooks, what is your response here to this action just announced by the Justice Department?
I think it's incredibly encouraging. At this point in our nation's racial history, and particularly in Ferguson, Missouri, we have people on the ground who want to know that there are people in the White House who are listening to them because they don't trust local authorities. So I think this is a very encouraging development. I would also note that the people that I've met with are looking for a president and an attorney general who are responsive to what's happening on the ground. And the fact that you have an army of FBI agents, the fact that there's been an ordering of the second autopsy, all of this will be met with appreciation by folks who are looking for accountability.
Michael Gerson, the thing that's come up here that I must say it had never occurred to me, but I understand what they're talking about here, this idea of our police departments becoming over-militarized, as it were. This seemed like a very good idea when the Pentagon started doing this. This is surplus equipment and so forth. There's no question that our police were being outgunned by some of these narco gangs and other things, terrorists and all of that. But it gives a different look to police departments, doesn't it?
No, I agree with that. I'm from St. Louis. Ferguson's 20 minutes away from where I grew up, and you look at the images, and this is not home. You see the rubber bullets, and this is not the America that we know. So there is an immediate reaction. I mean, there may be circumstances police require that in a major emergency, but as a first response, it does have some problems. I would say, though, it points out a couple of deeper things. One of them is it takes years for police to develop trust with a community. You can't summon it at the last minute during an emergency. This is something that has to be consciously constructed. And this is a tough situation where you have massive demographic change and institutional lag. So the institutions don't look like the community. That's a serious challenge. I would just throw in there that it also highlights a serious problem here with communities that are isolated from the broader progress of American society and prosperity of American society. And those problems are really concentrated with young African-American males, where our main response to their challenges, their problems in America, is either a squad car or a demand for child support. We have very little outreach to their concerns, their needs. So I think that's a wake-up call in this area, too. That's a context. It's not an explanation or an excuse. It's just the context of what we face.
Well, you know, Ruth, I mean, it's almost like this police department had been living in some sort of time capsule, and all of a sudden they opened the door and they came out and discovered, hey, it's not like it used to be.
And I think Michael is exactly right that you can't create this trust at the last minute, but you can make the situation way worse at the last minute. And that is exactly what we saw here. Cornell Brooks talked about the Keystone Cops and not being rude to the Keystone Cops. The difference is that the Keystone Cops did not have rubber bullets and SWAT gear and armored vehicles. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. And you have this paradox of the federal government simultaneously providing, and I think this is a very useful time to reconsider the provision of this military equipment to jurisdictions around the country and making sure if they have it, they know when it's appropriate to use and when it's not appropriate to use. And then the important role of the administration and the Justice Department in coming in. I think this news about the autopsy is very welcome. The FBI agents on the ground are very welcome. I would say the only point on which I disagree slightly with what's been said before is I think the president has actually struck a very good balanced tone here, because he is at the head of a criminal investigation and he doesn't want to go too far in overstepping the bounds there, while he wants to make sure that he calms the waters. I think that the distinction between the tone that the administration has set here and the tone from state and local authorities, with the exception of Captain Johnson in Missouri, has been very, very striking.
Right. I'm not talking about the tone alone, though that's critical. The president is always cool under fire, usually by bigoted racists who are assaulting him from various plates along the ideological spectrum. What I'm talking about, though, is leadership. That's not simply a matter of tone, because the reality is there is no functional equivalence between police people who are armed to the teeth with military-grade weaponry, trained at vulnerable black communities who are inflamed now as a result of decades of negligence. The president has a responsibility to say, look, this is one of the key points we expect of him because of his unique experience. As an African-American male, I know what it means to not have an autopsy report released. I know what it means to have a young man besmirched posthumously with no relationship that we can tell between what that was about on that camera and how he died. And I'm saying to you that if he could inform American society that, look, yes, we must keep the law. Yes, we must keep the peace. People must calm their passion. But let me explain to you why people might be hurt, why they might be angry, and why they might be upset. That's his responsibility to tell that truth, regardless of what those political fallouts will be.
I guess the facts of what they're doing to me, the FBI agents, the investigation, the second autopsy, speak even more loudly than anything the president might be able to say.
No, it's not either or. The president can do, look at LBJ. Look at, for God's sake, look at even what Nixon did vis-a-vis affirmative action, but look at what John F. Kennedy did. Look at what Bill Clinton did. No, there's not an either or. You can deploy political strategies and public policies, and at the same time, we need his leadership, his vision, his unique style. He's an oratorical genius. Deploy that in defense of the people from whom he learned that oratorical genius, and to defend those vulnerable populations, especially white people whose white privilege, in one sense, obscures from them what it means that their children can walk home every day and be safe. They're not fearful of the fact that somebody will kill their child who goes to get some iced tea and some candy from a store. Until that quality is brought, the president bears a unique responsibility and burden to tell that truth.
Let me ask Michael Gerson. You're seeing people on both sides, Republicans, Democrats, taking different views. I was a little surprised, I don't know why, but I was a little bit, that Rand Paul has stepped up, and he says there should be a difference between a police response and a military response. He says it's one thing for federal officials to work in conjunction with local authorities to reduce or solve crime. It is quite another for them to subsidize it. He seems to be making an appeal here. There's no question, I think, that he's trying to to run for president. Were you surprised to see him step out?
Not necessarily. This is very consistent with his libertarian ideology, distrust of authority in this case, and that oversteps its bounds. So I think that's fine. I think he's a very strange carrier of a message of outreach. This is a man who employed as a key staffer someone who called himself the Southern Avenger, who was believed that, said nice things about John Wilkes Booth. This is a guy who, when he ran for office, opposed the centerpiece of the Civil Rights Act. Right. Okay, in a real election where Rand Paul faced Hillary Clinton, she'd eat him for lunch on these issues because he is a deeply flawed representative of these ideas. But the Republican Party does need to be engaged in outreach.
Mr. Brooks, let me ask you, we're 50 years past the signing of the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. We've done broadcasts on it here. CBS has given extensive coverage to it. Where do you think we are now? What needs to be done?
When you look at the criminal justice system and the Ferguson Police Department, it is a back-to-the-past time machine. The criminal justice system reminds us as a nation just how deeply flawed we are with respect to race. We see this pattern over and over again in terms of Eric Garner, Michael Brown, where you have an underwhelming minor offense met with overwhelming major, often lethal use of force being played out around the country. And the point being here is when we look at the ways in which black and brown teenagers are treated relative to white teenagers, there's something profoundly wrong here. And so the point being here is this situation forces us as a country to basically say to ourselves, is Michael Brown my son, my grandson? Does he have the same moral value? And if the answer to that is yes, then we have to change the way we police. We have to change the way we run the criminal justice system.
Thank you very much, all of you. It's very illuminating. And when we come back, Peter Baker of the New York Times and Gerald Seib of the Wall Street Journal will join the discussion as we talk about the other big stories of the week.